It was a warm summer afternoon when a young couple left the Warrens Occult Museum in Monroe, Connecticut. They had laughed at the museum's centerpiece, mocking the idea that a Raggedy Ann doll locked in a wooden and glass case could hold any real danger. The doll had a round stitched face, button eyes, and a red yarn smile, hardly frightening compared to the grotesque masks, crucifixes, and artifacts that filled the museum's shelves. Before leaving, the young man rapped his knuckles against the glass and scoffed. "You're nothing but a doll," he said. Lorraine Warren frowned, warning him to show respect. But the couple brushed it off and climbed onto their motorcycle. On the road back, their laughter was cut short. The bike suddenly swerved, struck a tree, and flipped. The young man died instantly. His girlfriend survived, but swore later that just before the accident, she saw something sitting behind her. Something with button eyes staring through the reflection of her helmet, S visor. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe, as the Warrens believed, this was Annabelle's curse at work. Before we uncover more, take a moment to let me know in the comments what country and time you will re-listening from. And if chilling tales of haunted history help you drift into uneasy sleep, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. Annabelle's story begins not with Hollywood's sinister porcelain doll, but with something deceptively innocent. The real Annabelle was a Raggedy Ann, soft-bodied and childlike. The kind of doll you might find tucked into a toy chest or resting against a pillow in any little girl-esque room in 1970s America. But beneath that stitched smile lay something dark enough to terrify seasoned paranormal investigators. The doll first came into the hands of Donna, a young nursing student. Donna lived in a modest apartment with her roommate Angie, another nurse in training. In 1970, Donna S. mother purchased the large Raggedy Ann doll from a hobby store as a gift for her daughter, S. 28th birthday. It was cheerful, oversized, and comforting, the perfect whimsical decoration for the young woman's apartment. Donna placed it neatly on her bed, never imagining it would become the center of one of the most famous hauntings in American history. At first, the changes were subtle. Donna would leave the doll neatly arranged on the bed in the morning, only to return in the evening to find it shifted, sometimes leaning against the pillow, sometimes slumped against the wall. She assumed her roommate was moving it as a harmless joke, but Angie insisted she hadn't touched it. Days turned into weeks, and the movements grew more noticeable. Annabelle would be found in a completely different room, sometimes seated at the kitchen table, sometimes slumped on the floor. On one occasion, Donna left the doll on the couch only to return home and discover it waiting for her, sitting primly on her bed with its stitched smile turned toward the door, as though expecting her. The women began to grow uneasy, but unease turned to fear when they found something new. Scraps of parchment paper scattered throughout the apartment. On them, written in childish scrawl, were the words, "Help me." Neither Donna nor Angie owned parchment paper, and neither admitted to writing the notes. Then came the day when Donna found the doll with what looked like drops of blood on its cloth hands and chest, stains that could not be explained, that were not there before. It was around this time that Lou, a friend of the two women, became convinced the doll was more than just an oddity. Lou claimed to wake from violent dreams in which the doll climbed up onto his chest and attempted to strangle him. Other times, when he was awake, he said Annabelle seemed to follow him with her sightless eyes. One night, Lou entered the apartment alone, only to hear rustling noises from Donna's bedroom. Fearing an intruder, he pushed the door open. The doll sat motionless in a corner, its head tilted slightly to one side. Relief quickly gave way to terror when he felt a sudden, sharp pain across his chest. Looking down, Lou found 7 claw-like scratches seared into his flesh. 3 vertical, 4 horizontal, as though something invisible had raked at him. The scratches burned but healed unnaturally fast, vanishing within 2 days. By now, the 2 young women and their friend were convinced. Whatever was happening, it was beyond their control. Seeking answers, Donna and Angie contacted a medium. The seance that followed offered what seemed like an explanation. The medium claimed to sense the spirit of a young girl named Annabelle Higgins. According to the medium, Annabelle had lived on the property before the apartments were built, and she had died tragically young. Her spirit, the medium said, was lonely. She had seen Donna's doll as a comforting vessel, something to attach herself to. Annabelle, the medium claimed, simply wanted to be loved and accepted. Moved by pity, Donna and Angie agreed to let Annabelle stay with them. They believed they were offering kindness to a lost child's spirit, but in doing so, they had unknowingly opened their lives to something far darker, because what they welcomed into their home was not a child, and it was not human at all. Section 2, The Haunting Escalates. After the seance, the atmosphere inside the apartment shifted. Donna and Angie, convinced they had shown compassion to a lonely child spirit, began to treat the doll with a strange sort of reverence. They allowed Annabelle to remain, even speaking to her at times, as though she were truly alive. But instead of easing, the disturbances only grew more violent. Annabelle's movements became bolder, more deliberate. She was no longer merely shifting positions. The doll would be found standing upright against walls, something impossible for her soft body to do unaided. Doors creaked open in the night, footsteps echoed in empty rooms, and muffled knocks rattled the walls. Donna began to dread returning home after long shifts at the hospital, never knowing where Annabelle might be waiting. The notes returned as well. "Help us. Help Lou. Help Donna." Always scrawled in the same uneven handwriting, on the same strange parchment that none of them kept in the house. Sometimes the notes appeared tucked into furniture, other times left in the middle of the floor, as though placed carefully for them to find. Lou, who had already suffered the terrifying claw marks, became increasingly uneasy. He begged Donna to get rid of the doll, but she resisted, still clinging to the idea that a young girl's spirit was attached to it, and that casting it out would be cruel. One night, Lou was sleeping on the couch when he awoke with a start. A heavy pressure pinned him to the cushions, his chest locked in place, unable to move or breathe. Looking down, he saw Annabelle sitting on him, her stitched face staring blankly, her cloth hands pressed against his throat. He tried to scream, but the weight crushed his voice. Just as he felt himself slipping into unconsciousness, the doll vanished. Lou bolted upright, gasping for air, his body slick with sweat. The next morning, he swore he had not been dreaming. Things escalated again when Lou and Angie were preparing for a road trip. Alone in the apartment, Lou heard rustling from Donna's bedroom. Already on edge, he entered and switched on the light. Annabelle sat motionless on the bed. But then he felt something move behind him. Whipping around, he saw nothing. Turning back to the doll, he suddenly doubled over in pain. Looking down, he saw fresh claw marks tearing across his chest, this time deeper than before. Blood oozed through his shirt, though the wounds healed in just 2 days. As unnatural as the first attack. For Lou, this was the final proof. Annabelle was no little girl. Something else was manipulating the doll, something malicious. Finally shaken into action, Donna and Angie contacted an Episcopal priest named Father Hegan, who in turn reached out to higher authorities. It wasn't long before Ed and Lorraine Warren, the famous paranormal investigators, arrived at the apartment. The Warrens listened carefully to Donna and Angie's story. Lorraine, a clairvoyant, could sense immediately that the entity attached to the doll was not the spirit of a young child. In fact, it wasn't human at all. According to Ed Warren, the medium who had told Donna and Angie about Annabelle Higgins had either been deceived, or worse, had unknowingly acted as a vessel to further the entity's deception. The doll wasn't possessed. Instead, it was being used as a conduit. The true entity was demonic, using the doll as a mask to trick its way into the women's lives, into their trust, and ultimately, into their souls. The Warrens explained that demonic oppression often begins with small, seemingly harmless activities, movements, sounds, fleeting disturbances. But as the victim accepts and acknowledges the entity, the activity escalates. The goal is to instill fear, weaken resolve, and eventually break down the will of those it targets. Once that happens, the entity can attempt possession. Donna was horrified. She realized that by showing compassion to what she thought was a child's spirit, she had actually invited something sinister into her life. Worse, she had given it permission to stay. The Warrens arranged for a more thorough intervention. Father Cook, an experienced exorcist, was called in to bless the apartment and drive the entity away. He performed a recitation of prayers, moving through each room and dousing the space in holy water. For a time, the disturbances seemed to cease, but the doll remained a problem. The Warrens decided the only way to ensure the safety of Donna and Angie was to remove Annabelle from the apartment entirely. They agreed to take the doll into their care, but not without warning. The entity attached to Annabelle, Ed said, was not gone. It was simply weakened, and in removing the doll, they were taking the danger onto themselves. During the car ride back to Monroe, Ed and Lorraine experienced firsthand what Annabelle was capable of. Lorraine later recalled that the car's brakes repeatedly failed, forcing Ed to swerve to avoid crashes. Only after he splashed the doll with holy water did the disturbances stop. Back at their home, the Warrens placed Annabelle in their collection of haunted artifacts, which they kept locked away in their occult museum. But even there, the doll would prove she wasn't finished, because locking Annabelle behind glass wasn't enough to contain her curse. Section 3, the Warrens intervene. The Warrens had seen countless cases of hauntings, possessions, and cursed objects, but Annabelle quickly earned a reputation as one of the most dangerous artifacts they had ever encountered. Unlike most haunted objects that remain dormant when removed from their environment, Annabelle seemed to carry her influence wherever she went. Once in the Warrens' home, strange occurrences began almost immediately. The doll was placed in Ed's study, but within days, it appeared to move on its own. Lorraine, whose sensitivity to spirits was well known, refused to enter the room when Annabelle was present. She described an overwhelming sense of dread, a suffocating heaviness that clung to the air. Visitors were also affected. One Catholic priest, Father Jason Bradford, came to the Warrens' home to see the doll for himself. On entering, he mocked Annabelle, declaring, "You're just a rag doll. You can't hurt anyone." Ed and Lorraine warned him not to provoke it, but he laughed it off. As he left, Ed insisted he take care driving. Hours later, Father Bradford's car spun out of control on the highway. The accident nearly killed him. Shaken, he admitted to the Warrens afterward that he felt as though something had seized control of his vehicle. This wasn't the only tragedy linked to the doll. A young couple once visited the Warrens Museum, and upon seeing Annabelle, challenged her power. The young man banged on the glass case, daring the doll to scratch him the way it had scratched Lou. Ed rushed them out, furious at their arrogance. On the ride home, their motorcycle veered off the road, killing the young man instantly. His girlfriend survived, but swore they had been laughing about Annabelle just moments before the crash. These incidents only deepened the Warrens' conviction that Annabelle wasn't an ordinary haunting. She was an open door, a vessel for demonic influence. To prevent further disaster, Ed constructed a special wooden case lined with prayers and sacred protection, sealing the doll inside. A sign was added to the front, "Warning, positively do not open." Even then, Annabelle did not remain quiet. Museum visitors frequently reported seeing her shift within the case, her head tilted slightly or her hands positioned differently than before. Some claimed to see her eyes following them as they walked past. Others felt nauseous or faint just by standing too close. Lorraine recalled nights when she heard faint scratching sounds coming from inside the case, like tiny fingers dragging across the wood. At times, muffled knocks echoed from within, as if Annabelle were demanding to be let out. Despite the precautions, the Warrens knew Annabelle's influence extended far beyond her physical container. She remained a beacon for dark energy, a reminder of the dangers of curiosity and misplaced compassion. Lorraine would often tell visitors, "Don't confuse kindness with safety. The devil will wear any mask it needs to." And while Annabelle stayed sealed inside her case, her legend began to spread. Newspapers reported on the cursed doll, and soon Annabelle became one of the most infamous items in paranormal history. But Annabelle's story didn't stop at the Warrens Museum. Her presence began to inspire books, documentaries, and eventually, the terrifying portrayal in the Conjuring Universe films. And yet, as Ed once said, "Movies are safe, the real Annabelle is not." Section 4, the legacy of Annabelle. Annabelle may sit silently behind her glass case today, but her story refuses to die. What began in a modest Rhode Island apartment in the 1970s has grown into one of the most notorious legends in paranormal history. The Warrens kept her under lock and key in their occult museum for decades, refusing to allow anyone to handle her directly. Each month, a priest would visit to bless the case. Not the doll, but the protective barrier that kept her contained. Ed and Lorraine insisted this ritual was necessary because Annabelle wasn't an innocent object with a ghost attached. She was a conduit, a magnet for something far older, far darker. Visitors to the museum would often linger in front of her case, drawn to the simple red yarn hair and stitched smile of what looked like an ordinary Raggedy Ann doll. But the moment their eyes met hers, unease would spread. Many left quickly, refusing to stay in her presence. Some claimed to feel cold hands on their shoulders. Others swore they heard whispers as they passed her by. Even after Ed's passing in 2006 and Lorraine's in 2019, Annabelle's story continues to send chills through generations. She is not just a haunted doll, she has become a symbol of cursed objects everywhere. Paranormal investigators point to her as proof of how easily a doorway to the supernatural can open. And Hollywood only amplified her legend. The Conjuring introduced her to millions, but it was the spin-off films, Annabelle 2014, Annabelle Creation 2017, and Annabelle Comes Home 2019 that cemented her place in horror culture. Each film took creative liberties, but all drew from that single terrifying truth. Annabelle was real. Still, the most chilling detail isn't on the movie screen. It's in the very real warning etched onto her case. Positively, do not open. Because whether you believe or not, there are too many stories of tragedy, too many unexplained accidents, and too many lives touched by her dark influence to ignore. And maybe, just maybe, that's the point of Annabelle's story. To remind us that evil doesn't always announce itself with horns and fire. Sometimes it hides behind a soft smile, button eyes, and the stitched grin of a doll. So, if you ever find yourself in the dim halls of the Warrens Occult Museum, standing before the case that holds Annabelle, remember this: you are staring into the eyes of a legend that has ruined lives, ended them, and continues to whisper in the shadows of the world. And the next time you watch The Conjuring or the Annabelle films, you'll know. The real doll isn't on screen. She's still locked away, waiting. But for how long?